Hi, welcome everyone. If you've ever flown over Maine, you know it's like looking down at a quilt, somebody bunched all up. And you can see Mount Cadillac, and you can see Katahdin, and you can see the coast, and maybe you can see Monhegan if there's no fog out there. And that's the way the world is of artists in Maine that I've come to see and learned. I first started my project learning about Mildred Burrage because I lived in her house right here in Wisconsin. But she came here toward the end of her life, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story of her life, but how she came to found this fabulous place in 1958 when she was 68. So as you saw on the birthday cake that Jan Flowers baked for us, she was born May 18th in 1890. Her parents were very Victorian people. I brought pictures if you really want to see, but her father was in the Civil War. So just think, it's like the quilt and it's all bunched up. Here we are, 2024, and this man whose daughter started this place where we all are right now, served in the Civil War. He married, his wife was his second wife, was Mildred's mother, and she also was a person born in Maine and was given formal art instruction in Bangor, Maine, by names I'm not going to bother to rattle off, but they were pretty big names at the time. And so when Mildred came along in Portland, Maine in 1890, she was cultivated by her parents, who were part of the cultural elite of Maine. Her father being a historian, graduate of Brown University, and a theologian. She was well heeled in everything about Maine history. He wrote about Maine history, colonial Maine history. And to gather research, he went to Monhegan, which is one of the first places that white people came to this part of the world. And Earl Shuttleworth, our current state historian, has compiled letters, and he shared with me these letters by Mildred's father, in which he described his trip to Monhegan in 1911, where he met Robert Henri, and he took Mildred with him. So in 1911, she would have been 21, and she was dying to meet this artist. She didn't get to. Anyway, there was that part of her life. Then, through her father's encouragement, she had gone to a school in Providence, Rhode Island, where her teacher was Mary Wheeler, who was from a strong family of transcendentalists, connected with all the Concord names you can think of. And Mary Wheeler happened to have a house in Giverny pre-World War I, and she took her star pupils there, including Mildred Burrage. So as a young woman from Portland, Maine, she was exposed to all these conversations, just like the quilt, all bunched up. People got together for drinks, they got together for costume parties, and all they did was talk about art. One of the teachers that Miss Wheeler hired to teach her pupils was Richard Miller, and I brought this book about him. So I'm only sticking to who were the influences on Mildred Burrage, who were her mentors. And her mentors were her parents, her father, who taught her the importance of saving old buildings, like this Academy building, and her mother, who believed that she needed to express herself creatively, and art was a very acceptable thing for a young lady to do. In fact, it was more acceptable in America than it was in France, to be quite honest. Anyway, Richard Miller was another big influence in her life. Later on, after World War II, or during the end of World War II, Mildred and her sister Madeline, who was a jewelry designer, pretty well known, worked on commissions only, were volunteering at an arts and crafts place for shell-shocked soldiers on Staten Island. And it was while she was there that Mildred Burrage saw her first Jackson Pollock show. So her influences were her parents, her mother, Ernestine, this very Victorian-looking woman, and her father, Mary Wheeler, Richard Miller, and finally, when she saw the work of Jackson Pollock, she went bananas because she had been taught classically and then the manner of French Impressionists. And so to make that big leap and lead her to work in mica, which we saw last summer with an excellent show that preceded this one, it sort of began to jumpstart a new era for Maine Art Gallery. That's pretty much the story of Mildred Burrage. She lived the rest of her life in Wiscasset, and she worked very hard with all her artist friends and people who weren't artists to become patrons and keep this going. Everybody was a volunteer. They emptied ashtrays in those days, brought their wine and crackers and cheese, just as we continue to do. And I'm very pleased that this show and the one last year brought together people who had connections. Just Christine, her mother was in the very first show here, we learned, but her art is downstairs. And these two lovely ladies. With that, thank you for listening. I'm going to sit down.